So I'm standing in one of my student-related property deals. It's going to be a purpose-built student accommodation block. I thought it was a good time to talk about the biggest threats to the student accommodation market. It's not all roses. So here's number one, the build-to-rent sector. So the build-to-rent sector, buildings are being built by large developers and institutions and being funded in order to be built and then rented out to tenants rather than those same apartments and buildings being signed off individually. These sites are located in similar locations to where student accommodation blocks are, and as they're quite central, they're in a great position for professional students and the like. There's over 100,000 build-to-rent units in the pipeline or operational in the UK already, and that's rapidly increasing. The facilities are similar to what student accommodation have, and some of them on par and even better. Therefore, build-to-rent and purpose-built student accommodation have a lot of conflict of interest in terms of site location. Another thing that build-to-rent is going to do is potentially house students. So these build-to-rent schemes are willing and are able to take students in occupation as part of their schemes. Maybe these could be mature students, students in later years at university who don't want to live with other students, so that's a massive potential problem there. Again, so it offers more competition for tenants, trying to get the tenants in. One of the advantages though are that providers that have initially earmarked a scheme for, or a developer that's initially earmarked a scheme for student accommodation may then be in a position to amend that and make it a build-to-rent scheme or a co-living scheme. So there are some ways around it, but that's definitely an impact that build-to-rent is going to have on the purpose-built student accommodation market. 2, affordability issues when it comes to renting. The way the market stands now, rents in the purpose-built student accommodation market for ensuite rooms can range from anywhere from £4,000 a year right up to 6,000 plus. And for self-contained studio flats, well beyond that, it can be in the region of 10 grand plus, and more in certain parts of London. So it's not cheap, and a lot of students who are funded or get loans in order to pay for their accommodation, so their maintenance loans, simply don't have the funds to cover their rent. But it's clearly an affordability issue. So many students are getting help from their family, namely their parents usually, to help them with their rent. Some are getting part-time jobs, and a bunch are simply just struggling. And I think more light needs to be brought to this issue, that there is an affordability issue, and I think developers and providers have a duty to try and make rents affordable for students so they're able to enjoy themselves at university and continuing their studies without much worry or having hindrance from financial difficulties. Certain providers that are, especially those in the really high-end part of the market, may start to suffer if there's any impact from Brexit and international students start to wane and the numbers dwindle, or for any other reason, and they then need to rely on national domestic students for filling their rooms. They may start to struggle, because if they're highly leveraged at a very high rental and they can't then come down on those rents, there's going to be an issue. Even the ones that are targeting those domestic students, those rents can still be quite extortionate or quite high. So again, it's difficult for some of those providers to potentially reduce those rents to a point that's going to be affordable for students while still making it a viable and profitable business for them. So again, I think providers certainly have a duty to ensure that they're striking the right deals in the first place, and they're renting and they're doing properties at a rent level that students can deal with in the long term. 3 is, are there enough students to even rent your student accommodation? So the Office of National Statistics have forecast that the number of students over the next few years is going to dwindle. So there's going to be less students available to even rent accommodation. The rise of apprenticeships and alternative courses or ways for education will take students away from courses. Although those numbers are set to then increase again from 2025, there is a sort of medium-term impact to providers potentially, especially those who don't have their branding set aside, or they don't set themselves apart in their branding, or are really good at what they do. They may have an issue that way. The government has pledged to increase apprenticeships by 3 million by 2020, so that gives cause for concern, again potentially for students that won't be available to rent the purpose-built student accommodation. In the background there, you're going to probably hear some banging soon. That's the asbestos guys getting busy, so you'll see some of that. Brexit is another cause for concern potentially. Obviously the impacts aren't yet known, because it hasn't happened yet, but many students come from the EU, and in fact applications or students rather from the EU hit their highest point in 2017. So there's a large number of university institutions that are reliant, depending on students coming from other countries into the UK to study. So there could be a knock-on effect from Brexit. Again, that's something to pay in mind. How are you setting yourself apart as a provider? Is your branding on point? Are you then going to be able to get those students, if you're not able to get international students to rent your accommodation? Are you able to get the domestic students? How are you setting yourself apart? They are just a few of the threats that I believe are facing the student accommodation market, the purpose-built student accommodation market, at least right now. So tell me what you think is affecting the student accommodation market in the UK and what potential threats there are. Let me know, let's get a conversation going.